What's up, horror fans? Pete here from the Lassercast, where we talk about horror movies and streaming shows from all decades, including this current one, the 2020s. It is time to talk about one of the best horror shows of the year, of the 2020s, Interview with the Vampire. And of course, I would not want to be here with anybody else besides my vampire life mate, Dr. Zayas God, Danny Torkel.
It's almost as if I'm the Armand to your Louis.
Yes. And does that mean Brian's Lestat?
Hey, if the shoe fits.
There we go. I already have him at a loss for
down
words.
In the coffin for you.
Oh my god, he went right there, people. He just ran right to that point. That's one of my.
With this show, you can't help but get, a little bit thinking in ways.
Debaucherous ways, yes. And that is one of my tickers I have for the bottom today is banging in a coffin. We will get to that point, but I want to jump right to what I want to talk to Danny about right now, which is there's something that I've been alluding to that I've said to you, hey, there's a difference in the book from the 1994 movie. Do you know what it is now from this episode?
I don't know where you're going. I can only assume is it at the end that Armand is 100% responsible for setting up Claudia and Louis to be captured by the vampires?
No. I'm hoping that you watched all the way to the very end because there's something that's even a bigger deal.
Oh, that Lestat is there.
Exactly.
And Lestat is going to be one of the people at next week's trial.
Yes.
And so, which threw a huge wrench in it for me because now I'm like, oh my God. So Lestat is the one who is responsible for, you see now, again, this is going to be a conversation for next week's episode.
Sure.
I don't think the reappearance of Lestat in this case should negate the fact that Armand is a complete sellout here at the end.
No, it doesn't.
He does set them up to be put on trial. And in his defense, because I'm defending Lestat, he is called in basically to be a witness in this trial, and to his defense, they did try to kill him. So if they're on trial for attempted murder of a vampire, who better to interview than the vampire who was attempted murder on?
Yes.
I still blame Armand for this. I mean, it was a pretty cool wrench that Lestat just happens to be there getting ready for his reappearance in the trial. And I can only imagine next week what that is going to look like when Louis and Claudia see him for the first time.
Right.
But man, I know it's a shock, but this was a great episode and I can't wait for next week.
Shit, yeah. So that's the thing, man, is I have said many times before, I haven't read the book. But my daughter just read it recently. My wife's read it a long time ago. They're very knowledgeable of it. And Pepper was explaining to me and my daughter that Lestat does show up at the Theater de Vampire, but he's that sort of that worn down, beaten Lestat that we see in the 1994 movie. So he's not this good looking Lestat that we see at the end of this episode. I'm not sure if Lestat is completely healed or anything like that. At least physically, he looks healed.
Well, he was in the makeup chair.
Okay. It's a good point.
So we don't know if next week he's going to come out and look like handsome Sam Reed and then, peel back makeup to reveal that he's like the Tom Cruise that had escaped the Gator Swamp in Interview with the Vampire 1994.
Right.
I think that they could be setting us up for that. Because of how he was, sitting in that makeup chair, looking at his reflection. I don't know. Either way, it's going to be great to have Sam Reed back and to have basically the main cast back together.
Hell yeah.
Because, I mean, he's still, I think, second. This whole season, Sam Reed has been, as he was, second in the credits behind Jacob Anderson.
Yeah.
And yet he's barely been in the show. So
Right.
it's going to be great to have him back, and hopefully back to like main character status for the last couple of episodes.
Yes, I think that there are 2 more, right? There's next week's and then the week after that, and that's it. So let's kind of Tarantino it. We are jumping around in time. We went all the way to the end of the episode, but now let's bring it back to the very beginning. Very beginning cuts to Daniel and Rashid outside of Louis and Armand's house, their home, whatever you want to call it, their den. And they're in a restaurant. There's this interaction between Rashid and Daniel. Rashid goes to the bathroom, and then our agent from the Talamasca comes up and sits at the bar with Daniel. Now, when we see Rashid later, Rashid says that Daniel never left his sight. He doesn't admit that Rashid himself went to the bathroom at one point and that someone else talked to him, which makes me think, who's Rashid really working with? Did you think that too?
Yeah, it definitely led me to think, I mean, the fact that Rashid is standing there and that Raglan James from the Talamasca seems to know Rashid and knows his penchants for soap in the bathroom, that it definitely is, I think, a not so subtle hint that Rashid is probably double crossing Armand at least. I actually wanted to talk to you about Raglan James.
Okay.
And because I did some digging.
Okay.
Because somebody mentioned, I don't know if I don't know where I saw this, but somebody had mentioned that, he mentioned something about how, you really have to watch, it's
Louis.
not Armand.
Right.
You have to look at Louis.
Right.
But then he also mentioned something potentially about body swapping.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does.
Is that going to be a ticker later on?
I thought it was. I can't remember who exactly. Yeah, go ahead.
Because I actually dug into that a little bit, and I actually went and studied the Wikipedia link to The Tale of the Body Thief.
Uh-oh.
And I found out a lot about this character of Raglan James.
Yeah.
And he is hugely important.
Yes.
And last week, you kind of just threw this little bombshell out. And you were like, oh, yeah, there's going to be a Talamasca show.
Yes.
And I was like, oh. And now I'm thinking, now that I know that this guy Raglan is so important, that maybe I'm a little bit more interested in that.
Yes.
So I don't know. Do you want me to go into that now, or do you want to hold off on that until later?
You know what? Let's hold off till later, because The Tale of the Body Thief is after Queen of the Damned, right?
Yeah.
So it's like spoilers for a lot of stuff that's in the future.
Okay.
But we'll see if we want to address it or not. But you know what? The actor that's playing Raglan James, I've already said before, he's been in a couple of different HBO projects. He's kind of a bigger, known actor, versus a one-shot kind of guy. So, maybe he's going to be in that Talamasca series.
Yeah, and one of the other major Talamasca people is, I think, the character David, who was in Queen of the Damned, but is shown as this really kind of pathetic guy who is fawning over Marguerite Moreau's character the whole movie.
Right.
So and they don't do that character justice from what I was interpreting in doing some Anne Rice Vampire Chronicles research.
Yeah.
We can go back to your ticker and talk about this, because it does seem very obvious that they're setting up the second Rashid to be either associated with the Talamasca or working behind Armand's back.
Yeah.
Which I don't know how you work behind the back of Armand, because he seems to be able to read everybody's mind and know what everybody is doing.
Yeah. And that's actually something that's addressed in this episode too, right? Because I think Daniel asks him, you have the ability to read minds. How come you couldn't read the minds of the other vampires that you were working with at the Theater of Vampire? And he said he was kind of blinded by love. And then Louis says that basically he's been in power and he's been so powerful for so long that you get kind of lazy, right? But, you know, there's going to be stuff that's going to happen in the present day. And I think that in the last episode of this season, that's where it's really going to come into a head. And I guess we'll see if, like, the next season is going to be the Vampire Lestat. Is it going to be some kind of weird hybrid of, like, that and Queen of the Damned? We'll see. But, like, they're definitely setting up big picture stuff with this show. That's for show. Sure. I just said that's for show. But anyway,
for show.
Hey, dude, you said like Penchance or something before. I was like, damn, this show's getting to you. But anyway, let's talk about the interview itself now. So Daniel asks Raglan James some questions because he wants to know more about the Talamasca. And one of the questions is, like, do you work with nations? Raglan James just bypasses all the questions. And he says, you have to ask Louis and Armand these interview questions that we're going to give you. Now, I don't think that we see any of their questions yet in the interview, but the interview itself has changed the dynamic. Now, instead of it feeling like Armand and Louis versus Daniel, now it's Louis and Daniel versus Armand, right?
Yeah. And that comes to a head with Armand telling Louis that he asked for his like brain to be swapped, messed with after San Francisco. And I think that scene kind of annoyed me that Louis seemed to buy into it so quickly. Like, isn't that exactly what you would expect somebody to say if they were like, oh, I can't believe you blanked my memory. Why would you do that? You asked me to.
Right.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like, it just seems like the most easily cop-outable answer.
Yeah.
You asked me to, and then I erase that part of your memory too, where you asked me.
Yes. So one thing that I want to go into then is that the scene where they're in the cafe at the very end. See, we're jumping ahead again. We're totally flipping the timeline here. Like that scene, you think that Armand removed from Louis' memory as well, right? Where like all the people in the cafe freeze, and there's this fucking awesome shot of Ben Daniels just running in with like a sack, and like everyone freezes, and then there's that look of fear on Louis' face. Like, do you think that Louis doesn't remember it that way until the interview?
It feels like maybe that these are not erased memories, but like altered memories. And so talking about it brings it out in him. And because like we've asked this question covering this show for this season so far is if Louis finds out Armand is responsible for Claudia's death and that was a memory that had been erased, isn't that going to drive Louis crazy? And isn't that going to drive him to a point of vengeance?
Right.
And I'm really curious because I know that there is a book, The Vampire Armand.
Right.
However, having done a little bit of research into obviously Queen of the Damned because we covered the movie, and thank you to the 12 people who've watched that short video.
God bless them.
Yes. The Armand is not in Queen of the Damned, or at least he's not brought up at all in Queen of the Damned, whereas other vampires are.
Right.
And doing a little research into the Tale of the Body Thief, I saw that there are other vampires who we know who are in Tale of the Body Thief, but Armand is not mentioned. And so I don't know if that is foreshadowing or maybe backward shadowing that Armand is not going to make it out of this season, or that he doesn't make it out of, because obviously he survives the Interview with a Vampire movie in 1994.
Yeah.
And obviously that Anne Rice followed up his story, but I don't know where Armand's story ends. Does it, maybe it just completely diverts off into another direction. And maybe he finds himself in another part of the world, separated completely from Lestat and Louis and Marius and all these other vampires who we've heard about.
Yeah.
But,
One of the
but
what? Go ahead. Oh, actually,
no,
I was
no,
gonna say one of the.
I don't really. I'm just kind of like I'm. That's a big question for me. Is the status of Armand going forward?
Sure. So one of
Because we know Lestat's coming back,
yeah.
but we also know that Lestat's not going to die in these last two episodes. We
No.
know that this series going forward, and let's hope that it does, is going to have Lestat in it as a linchpin, because he's the linchpin of so much Anne Rice lore and story going forward.
Yeah.
I don't know where they're going to go with Armand, and I don't know how much more Armand's story has. You know, did you read The Vampire Armand?
I did not. The only ones that
so
I've read.
I don't even know, and maybe somebody in the comments can let me know. Maybe The Vampire Armand is a prequel.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's research I didn't do. And I want to again preface, by research I mean looking at Wikipedia. I didn't deep dive into this. You know, I am a teacher by day. I don't want my students to ever hear me say that research is Wikipedia. But like when researching a television show and the books that it's based off of, if I just want quick answers and plot points, I will go to Wikipedia.
Right. And I'll admit that too, that like when I make our videos for our show, if I'm like prepping the tickers and stuff on the bottom, I just go to Wikipedia and I often like just get character names and like maybe look at a plot summary. What's interesting about what you're saying is that in that Queen of the Damned movie, you know, starring Aaliyah, Armand is in the credits for that. Armand's in the credits and Louis is in the credits too. And I looked in the summary because there's that first of all, we're talking about this amazing show, but somehow we're going back to this shitty movie. You know, there's that stupid sequence where all the vampires just jump on Akasha, right? And she just flings some of them off and then they burn, right? And I was worried that one of those was Armand. I was like, oh shit, do I not remember Armand attacking Akasha and dying in the book? And then there's this one kind of like blonde boy that jumps on Akasha and gets flung off, but doesn't die. And I was like, oh, is that Louis? And then like when I looked up that actor, he was not playing Louis. So I'm like, who the fuck is Louis and Armand in this movie? You know? So I might have to do a little bit more research after this video. But one of the things I wanted to say,
maybe they had scenes cut and their name, that could be, or maybe they had maybe they cast them and cut the scenes and they gave them credits because they had done work on the movie. I don't know.
Yeah. So I kind of wanted to address a couple of things that you just said too. You were saying like, hey, maybe Armand goes off and does his own thing without Louis and Lestat in the books, right? One of the things I love so much about the Anne Rice books that I have read is that they have these periods of time where they're with certain vampires and like those vampires are like the whole fucking universe to them. And then something happens and they split up and then they just kind of are miserable for a little while. Then they get with another vampire and then that's like the whole universe to them again. And why I love that so much is because it kind of represents real life. You know, we have these romantic relationships. We really fall in love with someone. We're like so close to them. And then, you know, you think back on like certain ex-girlfriends you had and you're like, when I was dating them, I used to think, how could I ever not live with, or how could I live without them? And now, you know,
I don't even remember the names of any ex-girlfriends. There's only Athena for me.
Oh, there you go. Good call. That was a nice save. And my wife watches this too, so I got to be careful. But I just love that because Anne Rice really does a great job of capturing. I mean, that's what so much of this show is just relationships, how relationships can be toxic, codependency. That's such a big part of this show.
Yeah. If you take the vampire stuff out of this show, it's a phenomenal like HBO style family drama with like a lot of sex and like arguments and relationships, and it almost feels like it could be like a 6 Feet Under type, where they have families and they have, you know, clique groups and, you know, it does feel very similar to that. And then, oh yeah, there's vampires. I forgot. They're biting people and they're attacking people, and yes,
and straight up slaughtering them, you know. And what's interesting about that though is that the vampire side of it actually does play a pretty big part in this particular episode, because you have, wait do you see this ticker, Danny? This ticker, you have a 200 word limit for a ticker. I used up pretty much the entire thing for this ticker. Okay, let's see if someone can read this while I'm saying this. But basically, there's this conspiracy against Armand and Louis going on in this episode. And once again, you have one of these amazing sequences where Armand is being interviewed. He's flashing back to when he was watching a play. He's watching a rehearsal for a play that's starring Ben Daniels, Santiago. Santiago is doing a monologue about being a vampire. Meanwhile, he's having a telepathic conversation with two other vampires that are talking to a guy about Lestat. This is all happening at once. It's like so ridiculous, but I fucking love it. I love shit like that. It reminds me of like the X-Men, and it's just this cool thing of, you know, when people have powers in movies, whether they're like monster powers or superhero powers, there's like the basic easy way to use those powers, but then you have creative, convoluted ways to use them. And this show never shies away from that.
No, I love that. And in that scene, Armand is also, Santiago is also arguing with Armand about like the minute details of the play.
Right.
And Santiago is having a staged argument with one of the people he's having a telepathic conversation with. He's like staging an argument about the script in front of Armand to throw Armand off.
Right.
And it's just fantastic stuff. And the acting all around is great. And it seems like this, like it just reinforces why I love this show. And then there's another moment later on, which I'm sure we're going to talk about, where you have Claudia and Louis sitting with Madeline, and then Armand like leaves them to go and interview Madeline on why she should become a vampire and whether or not he should be the one to make her, because they don't want to infect her with Lestat's blood, which
so good.
They both have.
Right. And
so she and Armand are having this amazing conversation in French, while in the very next room, Claudia and Louis are having this great conversation while smoking cigarettes. And that all culminates to this amazing scene where they do turn Madeline. And it was at that moment where I realized we don't give, for as much praise as we give, we really haven't like mentioned the names of the directors of these episodes. Okay. Because that scene where Madeline is on the table and she's staring up at the light and the camera is like rotating around slowly, and Louis and Claudia's talking her through it and then there's this amazing scene where Louis bites her and you start to get these flashbacks, but the light that she's staring at is like there while you're seeing the flashbacks, and it almost felt like I was inceptioned, like into. So the actress Roxanne Duran, who we wanted to shout out last week and we didn't remember, is fantastic as Madeline. Absolutely. But the director of this episode, who I thought, wow, what a fucking amazing scene I'm watching. The director of this episode is Emma Freeman. She's only the 6th director to work on this show. Levon Aiken did the most episodes. He's done 6, and he did a couple of this season's episodes, which we've loved. And then it's 2 episodes apiece for Keith Powell, Alan Taylor, who did Thor: The Dark World.
Random.
And Craig Zisk. And then Alexis Ostrander directed 1 episode. But just those people it's only 6 people who've directed these so far, 13 episodes.
Yeah.
And the show has such an amazing continuity. It feels like if you told me that one person directed all of these episodes, I'd be like, yeah, that makes perfect sense, because they
Right.
all have the same, they all have that phenomenal acting, the great sequences. Some of them are shot differently, but it's the scope and of the show just feels great. And again, Roland Jones, who created this show, he has an amazing TV pedigree that goes back to shows on HBO and Showtime, all of which are amazing successes. And so I just feel like all we do is we get together on a Monday or a Tuesday and we just shower this show with praise.
Yeah.
And we need to give credit to the people who are doing the behind the scenes work, because the people in front of the screen are fucking phenomenal. They deserve to be showered with awards.
Yes.
At the Emmys or whatever award show, Saturn Awards, Chainsaw Awards, whatever.
Sure.
This show doesn't get talked about nearly as much as it should, and it's a combination of the great people behind the cameras and behind the set and in front of the cameras.
Yes. Thank you so much for bringing up all their names, because they definitely deserve it. I remember watching that sequence where they turned Madeline into a vampire, and right when it was done, I was like, that did not feel like a part of a television show. That felt like part of like a movie that I saw in a theater that like people are going to be talking about. Like this really, really great sequence.
100%.
Because there's this dialogue that's going on while he's making her too, where he's talking about like her childhood, and they show like experiences that she went through. They show like the aftermath of her having that lover that was a Nazi. And, you just think about how many extras and stuff they had to have just for that quick, like 20-second flashback of her getting her hair cut off with some other women in the street. And they put all that effort into the show. I mean, just a 20-second flashback. Yeah, go ahead.
As somebody who, when I say I love Les Miserables, I'm underselling it. I've seen it. I think Athena and I have seen it 5 times together on Broadway.
Dang, okay.
Yeah, it's my favorite show of all time, my favorite musical of all time. That scene was very Les Miserables. And Roxanne Duran was unbelievable. She felt very Fantine-esque, especially, she's, called basically a whore for sleeping with this Nazi guy. She's getting her head shaved in the street. It's very Les Miserables there. So that scene hit me in a very special way, because it just reminded me of my favorite musical. And it's in France, of course. That's the biggest thing.
Yes. Well, yeah, right. But you know what?
About 100 years off from the time period of Les Mis, but still.
Yeah, it's got that effect. Yeah. So the movie, that sequence that we're talking about that we're giving so much praise to, it's one of many that happened in this episode. And prior to that sequence, Madeline is in her shop. These drunken people come in the street and they start to draw a swastika on her front window. She gets so fed up with them that she throws her iron through the window and it breaks. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, so they're going to come in and attack her, and then Claudia is going to come in and kill them, which is exactly what happens. But the way things are done, even if you can predict what's going to happen, if the way things are done are not exactly how you expect, or it's like creative, then you can accept it. Even if you're like, okay, this is going to happen, then this is going to happen. And so she's scared. She's like getting attacked by these men. And, and then all of a sudden a light flickers outside. Then you hear this kind of weird gurgling noise after this woman's screaming. You see that she's stuck in the wall, Michael Myers style, but with a pair of scissors, right? And then
good reference.
And then Claudia is just basically feasting on one guy's throat. Such a great sequence. Not to mention that the door just like flies off the hinges and hits one guy, and the blood from his head goes onto the camera lens too, which I thought that was a great touch as well. So just another great sequence. And you expect certain dialogue when you see a scene like this. And Madeline does kind of say, "You're a vampire." She struggles to say the words. It's kind of like Twilight. But then, like Claudia just kind of says, "I need your help. If you don't do this, then there's probably going to be trouble." And all of Madeline's reactions are not dialogue that I could predict from a mile away. Like, as a guy that watches like The Acolyte and all this shit that I have to review on my other channel, it's like, okay, they're going to say this, then they're going to say that, and then they literally fucking do it. But on this show, it's like, even though you know essentially where it's going, they take the time to say things that are different, things that you're not expecting. I mean, we really should talk about. Go ahead.
Oh no, I just wanted to say it bothers me how good Roxanne Duran is in this show because I know she's dying in the next episode.
Right.
Or like she's dying soon. And it bothers me because I'm like, she's so fucking good. And that scene, like her reaction to Claudia killing those attempted rapists, yes, I did kind of get a Twilight vibe, only with the you're a
vampire,
velociraptor, yes. And if anybody understood that reference, that's a reference to a Nighthawk Cinema commercial, or maybe it's Alamo Drafthouse, like before the movie starts commercial.
Yeah.
If anybody got that reference. But yeah, that she's so good in that scene. She's so fucking good in the scene with Armand, holding her own against this like all-powerful vampire.
Ancient
as
vampire,
just like you don't think I can handle being a vampire? Like, I survived Nazi-controlled France. Like, being a vampire will be easy for me. And, like, I totally believed every moment. And then you find out that, really, it's not anything she said that dissuaded Armand. It's just that Armand is, like, again, kind of a fucking pussy when it comes to this shit. He's like, oh, I've never turned anybody. I don't really know how to do it. I don't really want to.
That beige pillow. Yeah.
What a beige pillow.
No. That is a great sequence where they cut back to the present day, and he kind of admits he's like, I've never turned anyone. He says the idea kind of disgusts him, and so it's interesting to think that he's lived so long and he's never made a vampire of his own. You know. But that's why he collects other people's vampires, like he collects Louis, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So that sequence, I just want to talk about that sequence for a second, because when that happened on screen, you know, Sherry was like, oh, wait, that's different from the book. Like, Louis makes her into a vampire. And so we thought that Armand actually was going to do it, because their logic to have Armand make her into the vampire, that made a lot more sense, right? He's older, stronger. He doesn't have Lestat's blood in him. And so we thought that was what was going to happen. And then, of course, he admits he's never done it before. So Sherry was kind of like, well, what was the point of that scene if he didn't end up making her into a vampire? And I was kind of explaining that it just sort of shows Louis and Armand's like relationship. It kind of fleshes it out even a little more, because
I think
like,
it also, I think it also, it's another example of Louis and Claudia basically going into business for themselves against the wishes of Armand and the Coven.
Right.
And for Armand, it's probably the straw that breaks the camel's back when it comes to the Coven forcing him into a decision where there's only so many times he's told them no, or you know, it was just an episode ago where he very angrily tells Claudia, you are never to see this woman again.
Right.
Now she shows up to save her, kills somebody in front of her, kills 3 people in front of her, drinks the blood, lets her know that she's a vampire, and now is basically auditioning her to be another member of their group.
Yeah.
And you know, and then so they bring Armand in. Hey, Armand, why don't you turn her? And Armand says no. And so then the next time we see Armand and Louis, he's like, wait, you're going to do it anyway? He's like, yeah, we're doing it tonight. And he says, I said no. And then like he just stops and kisses him in the park. And it's like, again, it's this idea of like, look, you tell me no, I'm going to do it anyway because you love me and you can't get enough of this.
Right.
And it almost feels like as much as we want them to make it, we know they're not going to, but it feels like Louis and Claudia kind of pushing it one step a little bit too far, where, you know, this is the head of a coven. This is a vampire who is more powerful than both of them.
Right.
And if not for Armand, they already would probably be dead with all the ways that they have pissed off these French vampires.
Yes.
So
which
I
brings
think that scene is really important with, you know, the idea of bringing in Armand, having him tell them no, and then them basically saying, all right, well, we're going to do it anyway. I think that's, it kind of sets up the whole rest of the episode, and where we end this episode is because of that entire interaction.
Yes. Yeah. And I think it's a good time for us to segue back to banging in a coffin, because just what you were saying about how, like, you know, Louis kind of controls Armand with his love. And I think there's even this one great line in this episode where, like, Claudia asks Louis, she's like, so Armand is your Lestat. And I think Louis says, I'm Armand's Lestat. He said, there's some kind of line like that where he's like, no, I'm the one that's calling the shots. And there's a scene in the very beginning of the episode with this banging in a coffin scene where, like, Louis all excited about a deal that he's made, and he starts to talk about how he can make all these fortunes. It kind of sets up their current status in the modern day. And he's so, like, excited that he's, like, turned on, and he's like, get naked and get in that coffin. And it's, like, real vulgar. I mean, he says something else, but I'm in my daughter's bedroom.
He goes, I'll tell you as I fuck you.
Right. It's so ridiculous. He says that, and, you know, I am not qualified to talk about homosexual relationships or anything like that, but I don't even want to say a relationship between a man and a woman. Like, in a relationship, there's often a person that's the more dominant one, and there's the more sort of I don't know what the word is I'm trying to say, but, like, you know, the person that gets dominated, basically, right?
And the submissive,
Thank you. Gets dominated, submissive. And so, like, it's interesting that Armand has so much power over his coven. He's such a powerful being, but he becomes very submissive with Louis. Like, Louis is definitely the dominant one. And that scene kind of shows it. Now, kind of taking it back to,
maybe that also ties back to the Daniel line at the beginning, where Raglan tells him to, what, you know, you're worried about Armand, you should be worried about the other one.
Right.
Because maybe that has something to do with, like, Louis's power over people.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, because he's definitely had an effect on Armand and Lestat. Now, to kind of take it back to a metaphor for relationships and people, I think that, like, the Theater to Vampire is kind of like, they're like your D&D group or your band or your writers group, like that group of creatives that's like you share a bond. Everyone else is an outsider. And what happens is someone brings their girlfriend into the group, right? That's like the extra person you bring into the group. And everyone gets mad that you brought the girlfriend because she's not exactly like the rest of us. And she wasn't here before. And then all of a sudden, when she starts breaking the rules and changing things, and the whole group's like, no, fuck this girlfriend. You know, we want, you know, our old guy back, right? We want our old friend back. So are you saying
Claudia's Yoko?
Yeah, no. Louis is Yoko.
Oh, Louis is Yoko. Okay, I can see that. Yeah.
Louis is Yoko, and then I guess, like, Claudia is like his little adopted daughter that, you know, is bringing in too, you know? And then the adopted daughter's bringing in another person too. So, like, these people have got to go. And then that brings us to this great little, like, quick sequence where they're showing Ben Daniels just driving on a bike, and they allude to all these crimes that are happening in Paris. And you hear to, like, what they're stealing, and they're like, okay, wait a minute. They're stealing something that, like, reflects sunlight. I think there's, like, some kind of projection material. Like, oh, what are they stealing? This doesn't sound good. You know, what were you thinking with that?
It was very interesting because I was trying to figure out why, you know, I all the stuff with, like, the headlines and the newspapers, kind of throws me off a little bit because I don't know if it's Talamasca stuff or it's stuff that's being given to him by Louis and Armand.
Yeah.
So obviously they are stealing things to to set us up for next week.
Right.
And I have the flashback obviously to the film, the 1994 movie, where in that movie Claudia, and I don't even know if she has a name in that movie, but we'll call her Madeline just because it makes sense. But in that movie, Claudia and Madeline are like thrown into this, basically this pit,
like a
that
well.
has a well, and they're stuck in there. And obviously it's the sun is about to come up, and the sun rises above the well, and the sunlight shines down into it and kills them that way. So obviously it's not going to be exactly that, but it's going to be something similar, with maybe the reflection of sunlight being put onto them. But we got a glimpse last week of what happens when a vampire is hit with sunlight, when Louis stepped into the sun. So again, like, I love Delaney Hales and I love Roxanne Duran. It's just a shame that, we know what's happening.
Yep. So then that kind of brings us up to kind of the end of this video. And then I think that, like, we should do some of that fantasy booking, that term that you gave us from wrestling that I love. I use it in so many of our shows. Fantasy booking as to what's going to go down. I'll kind of say mine and then you say yours. Okay. So I think that basically there is going to be a trial. It's going to be very sensational. And it's so crazy that it's held as a matinee performance in the theater, right? And then Lestat's there. I think that, like, it'll maybe even seem like Louis could maybe plead their case and, like, kind of get them out of it. But the vampires are still going to be like, yeah, we're going to kill them. And I think that either through, like, Lestat's actions or Armand's actions, Louis is going to get saved. And then I think that instead of, like, Louis coming back and getting his revenge, I think that, like, the frying of Claudia and Madeline, like, whatever they use, whatever that device is, that's just going to cause the fire in the theater. What do you think?
That I think makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think that, like, we're going to have this, like, kind of pause where Louis kind of deals with the loss. I think it's just going to be that, like, chaos is going to erupt. The audience is just going to fucking get killed, whether the vampires kill them or a fire kills them. And then, like, I think that maybe even Lestat might get hurt more so that he's incapacitated for a longer time too. But what do you think? This is all my speculation.
I think that, so in the movie, again, which is my only point of reference, while the women are put into that well to be roasted by the sun, Louis is, and I guess it was done as like an even worse torment than death, is he's like entombed in the wall, where he's like basically going to live the rest of his life for eternity, entombed behind this wall, knowing that everybody turned on him and his the two people that he loved are killed, or the people that were with him are killed. And in the movie, Armand is the one that saves him from that. So I kind of think they're going to stick to that idea, that maybe we see Lestat there as a witness in his own trial, in Louis' trial. And I don't know. Maybe I've talked myself into thinking that he's going to reveal that he's still recovering from everything that happened.
Right.
But I don't know if Lestat's going to play a bigger part than that, because I think the story is that, because they did threaten Louis earlier this season with the entombing. I think Santiago said something to him like, if you're not careful, you'll be behind, or maybe there was a line about like, you'll be behind the wall with the
guy that made Santiago
did that to his maker.
Yeah.
So I do think that that is what is going to end up happening to Louis. And I think that it only makes sense that Armand is the one who pulls him out and saves him, because obviously, despite the betrayal, they are together. So it only makes sense that it's Armand that saves Louis and, brings him with him wherever they go. And they then spend the next 50 years, 60 years together leading up to the present. Also maybe it's only about 25 years between the time in France and 1973. So maybe it's those 25 years. It's those 25 years of living with Armand, knowing what Armand did to,
Claudia.
Set up for Claudia and Madeline's death.
Yeah.
Maybe it's that just drives Louis to say, fuck it, I'm going to spill the beans on the entire vampire lore to the first fuckable reporter that I see in this bar in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And, and then I'm going to walk into the sun and kill myself because I'm so miserable.
Right.
So maybe that's like the timeline we're looking at. I don't know. I still think that I'm actually shocked by the whole Lestat being there in France in 1940s.
I knew it. Yeah.
Because that really does throw like a whole wrench in a lot of what I was thinking is going to happen. That's why I don't think that it's going to be a Lestat at full strength, and I don't think it's going to be a Lestat that plays a big role in Paris during that time.
Yeah. Oh man, dude, I am like chomping at the bit to watch that next episode, And so
there's 2 episodes left, and if these episodes are like an hour, they're like an hour each. They're like an hour and 15 minutes on AMC. There's a lot of commercials.
Add extra 10 commercials for Burger King and Orphan Black.
So somebody in the comments mentioned that they have AMC Plus, and obviously, if you're paying $4.99 a month for AMC Plus, you're probably not getting those commercials. So they were confused by all of our talk about the ridiculous commercial breaks.
Yeah.
They were a little bit better this week, but they're still incredibly abrupt.
Yeah, very jarring. Yeah.
Which is why I never watch the show when the show starts, and I do this with most television. I actually started watching this episode. I actually watched this episode this morning, which was great. I got to watch it. I got to skip through the commercials. It was wonderful.
Yes.
But yeah, if they could just take the next 2 episodes and put a 2-hour movie in the theater, I'd pay full price. Let's go.
Hell yeah. You'd go there to Nighthawk, the Alamo, even Regal, whatever it is, you'd be there.
Well, I do have Regal Unlimited, so I'd probably look for Regal first, but yeah.
Yes. And you'd be there with your Dune popcorn bucket waiting for somebody to get sucked in some kind of way. So, he's whipping it out. For those of you that are listening to a podcast, he's whipping it out. He's now holding the Dune
popcorn bucket. There we go, baby.
Get in your coffin and fuck the
It
Dune
is always
popcorn
within
bucket.
an arm's grip.
Oh, Christ. All right, that's a good stopping point for this episode. So, Danny,
when you and Brian cover like Star Wars or Disney Plus Marvel stuff, does it ever get like super weird, or are we just like a unique
No.
pairing?
You are a bit more of an exception, my friend, than Brian. Brian keeps it a little bit more low key, but he doesn't have as many props. But I think the shows that me and Brian cover are so fucking dull sometimes compared to this that
I'll tell you, all the talk I've seen about The Acolyte, it makes me want to watch the show just because like people are saying it's like the worst thing that they've ever done.
Yeah.
Chris even said if he stopped watching it right now, he'd be perfectly fine, but he's also bizarrely interested to see where it's going. I'm like, that makes me want to check it out. Like if you just were talking about how, it's so fucking good, I'd be like, all right, another Star Wars show. but
Right.
like I'm intrigued by how ridiculous it seems.
Well, you, like our viewers, can always go check out those videos on Comic Books Transformed. One show that Brian and I are covering that we do love that is good is The Boys season 4. So we have the first 2 episodes of that coming up, I think, tomorrow. We got a
Nice.
review for that. That's going to be on our channel. But Danny, let's talk about our channel for a second. What's going on the Lastercast?
So we are obviously covering Interview with the Vampire every week. We get together on Mondays. Our videos usually go up Tuesday mornings at 9 o'clock. There's 2 more episodes that go up on AMC 9 o'clock, I believe, on Sunday nights.
Yeah.
But until then, we are also spending the M Nights of Summer. We are reviewing films from the Shyamalan family. We have reviews of The Watchers by Ashana Night Shyamalan, and we just posted a review of Unbreakable that went up this morning. I had a great time rewatching that movie with Charlotte and talking about it with you. I fucking love that movie, and it was great to be able to watch it again and like talk about it. Next week we're going to be doing The Visit.
Yeah.
And then we're going to kind of bounce back and forth between his, early, I'm still a successful director period and the I need to rebound my career period. So we're going to bounce back to The Village. We're going to bounce ahead to Split. And we're going to work ourselves up till early August, where his new film, Trap, is coming out in theaters, starring Josh Hartnett. I'm going to start posting a few shorts on M. Night Shyamalan movies to kind of whet the appetite for those longer reviews that we do on Saturday mornings.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, aside from that, we've just been living with Interview with a Vampire. We have some cool ideas, though, I think, that we're going to start maybe doing over the summer.
Yeah. Danny's got some good ideas, and his summer break is just about to start, whereas mine has less than a month left. So anyway, if y'all like our Interview with the Vampire stuff, make sure that you are subscribed. We are the Lastercast. Leave some comments and some likes, and we will bite you on your dicks.